Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
We've had some cannons fired at us from a fellow YouTuber by the name of In Praise of Shadows.
And honestly, it is sad. Overall, it's a sad thing.
But what I got instead was the worst attempt at a hit piece I have ever seen on YouTube ever.
In this video, I will be addressing remarks made about me by a YouTuber called In Praise of Shadows.
I want to kind of respond because I really feel like I was taken in the most bad faith representation possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, there has been a little bit of drama circulating around the YouTube community lately. And it all comes from this guy right here, In Praise of Shadows. He's a YouTuber with a few 100,000 subscribers who makes horror movie and TV show analyses and retrospectives. He recently released a video called Bad Conservative Horror Movies. Everyone's response to this video was so bad that he had to take a month break and also deleted his Twitter account. He also ended up taking down the video altogether. What could he have possibly said in this video that was that bad?
He is friends with Brandon Buckingham, a gun YouTuber who has been accused of threatening rape.
Oh. Yeah, that's just a lie. Like, that's pretty much slander. So yeah, I found out about this whole thing from a tweet by Brandon Buckingham, which is just a clip of him lying about Brandon, and I was intrigued, to say the least. So I checked out the video, and I'll be going over it today in this video in the most objective way I possibly can. And by that, I mean I'll try to stay away from personal attacks and stuff like that. I just want to remain objective and focus on the premise of the actual video. So with that, let's get into it.
If you're not aware, Wendigoon is a horror conspiracy theorist YouTuber with several million subscribers that, as you will hopefully come to see, should not be seen as the wholesome, southern-friendly dad persona that he has publicly constructed around himself in the past several years.
Now, I'm starting at the end because that's where most of the criticism for this video comes from. Now, the entire final part of this 4-hour-long video is essentially a giant hit piece on the YouTuber Wendigoon. In case you don't know who Wendigoon is, he essentially makes horror content where he talks about cryptids and conspiracies.
The government is hiding billions of pounds of cheese in hidden caves underneath the United States that it is selling off by manipulating our advertising and education systems to our detriment in order to turn a profit.
Yeah. I think he makes pretty good content. I personally like it. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe In Praise of Shadows is going to prove why Wendigoon is a terrible person.
I have no need or desire to hear 5 hours of opinions on Blood Meridian from a 21-year-old millionaire who got famous around the age of 19. There are some works that fundamentally will not be understood by you if you are wealthy and have always been upper class your entire life.
Essentially what he's saying is that you cannot truly understand pieces of writing written from the perspective of average and poor people if you are not an average and poor person.
And this may all sound condescending, but that doesn't stop it from being somewhat true. What I'm talking about here pertains to the very act of writing itself, and with that, perspective. And I don't know if you can actually really truly be a good cultural critic with a voice that has a definitive perspective, without several years of genuine, independent, lived experience away from the home that you were raised in.
I do actually somewhat agree with this. Having more lived experience will help you to better understand other people's perspectives. My issue, though, is that this criticism doesn't really pertain to Wendigoon. He does not appear ignorant at all in any of his videos. Sure, he's not poor, but I don't think that by itself really invalidates his opinion on Blood Meridian.
But also, I'm not even here to criticize his body of work. I think his videos are very uninteresting, but ultimately that is secondary to what makes him worth talking about.
I find that statement quite confusing because the whole point of this video is to criticize bad conservative horror movies. So why is Wendigoon in this video if you're not here to criticize his work?
The first of which are the very strong beliefs that he seems to hold as important, that are in my opinion the antithesis of what horror should be about.
And that right there is the main premise of the video. It's the idea that conservative ideas do not belong in horror. I think this is a pretty bad take, and I'll elaborate more on it later, but here are some of the reasons that In Praise of Shadows uses to justify his premise.
There are many things that are red flags that we could talk about, from the bizarre gun ownership.
I don't see how owning a gun is a red flag in this situation, and I don't see how it proves his point.
The flagrant use, from my perspective, of his religion as a shield from criticism, to the belief that he at one point followed many far-right accounts on Twitter from Kyle Rittenhouse to Parler.
He mentions how Wendigoon uses his religion as a shield from criticism. Remember that for later, because that's an important detail. He also followed far-right accounts on Twitter. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think just following somebody on Twitter means that you directly believe in what they believe in. Like, I personally just follow anyone I find interesting, regardless of if I agree with them or not.
People said, oh, he only followed them. But that doesn't mean that he agrees with them. But there are screenshots of tweets that may have been deleted. They clearly, in my mind, show a support to Rittenhouse.
Assuming these screenshots are real, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, in the court case, it was ruled as self-defense, so do with that what you will.
We could talk about his past and supposedly being a founding member in an online conspiracy theory group that, according to him, snowballed out of control into being a white supremacist neo-Nazi organization called the Boogaloo Boys. His online username at the time was Boogaloo Boy, and he claims to be the first to have started using it, but that he left the group and became Wendigoon after things started to get out of hand.
So he was part of a group that turned into a far-right extremist organization. So he left. Isn't that, like, a good thing? Like, isn't that what you'd want him to do?
As you'll see, he was just like, oh geez, sorry guys, about starting a violent hate group guys. Sorry that people got killed. I totally didn't mean to do all that. My bad. I'll do better next time.
We've already established that he left the group before all this happened, yet In Praise of Shadows is still insinuating that he is responsible for people dying. That is an extremely far reach.
Also, it should be noted that the Boogaloo Boys are known for wearing Hawaiian shirts, and guess who else always has on a Hawaiian shirt, despite the fact that he publicly totally does not share in their beliefs, guys.
Okay, so Wendigoon is a part of a far-right hate group because he sometimes wears a Hawaiian shirt in his videos. Cool.
In my opinion, there is a regular pattern of behavior there, from supporting Rittenhouse to having multiple ties to other far-right extremist figures.
He then goes on to list some of the people Wendigoon has associated himself with in the YouTube community. But before I get into that, there's something I'd like to address. I'm aware that by the time this video has come out, this is pretty old news, but unfortunately in the middle of editing this video, I got very sick, like bedridden sick. I don't know if you can still hear it in my voice, but it hurts to talk. Guess I picked the perfect week to start a commentary channel. I'm only saying this because I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to dogpile on this guy over some 2-week-old drama. Like, the night all this stuff came out, I stayed up till like 4 a.m. writing a script about it. Sorry if I sound out of it for the rest of this video. I'm just very sick and I need to get this thing out, so please enjoy.
Wendigoon is very publicly friends with Turkey Tom. They have been seen together on multiple occasions, and I've seen online mentions that Tom was either at his wedding or at the very least was invited. Tom has been accused of using the N-word multiple times in private conversations, including these screenshots of texts that are alleged to be real.
Assuming these screenshots are real, they are also 5 years old. Around this time, Tom would have been 16.
Wendigoon is publicly connected to the Internet Historian, and has even appeared in his videos. The Internet Historian publicly said that his birthday was April 20th. It is not, and has only said that as a joke because that is Hitler's birthday.
He just made a 420 joke that you don't like? And how does a joke by the Internet Historian make Wendigoon a bad person?
Wendigoon is publicly friends with Donut Operator, and even retweeted a photograph of the two of them hugging. He was once a cop himself, before he made more money making YouTube videos and retired. His content is very pro-state, pro-cop, pro-gun, and pro-death to people who don't share his beliefs propaganda.
Alright, that was a lot of stuff, so let me break that down. Pro-state, referring to a gland in the male wait, that's not right. There it is, pro-state, referring to favoring state government over federal government. However, the definition I think In Praise of Shadows is going for is the one where you're in favor of big government and government control. This is proven by what In Praise of Shadows says later on. Pro-cop referring to the fact that Donut Operator makes police content and he was also a cop himself, but it should be noted that Donut Operator is also critical of cops whenever they mess up. Pro-gun, of course, referring to the fact that Donut owns guns and shoots them with his gun tuber friends. He's also very pro-Second Amendment and against pretty much all forms of gun control. That makes for quite the contradiction on In Praise of Shadows' part, because how can you be pro-big government and against gun control at the same time? Like, when the government's trying to essentially take away your guns, in Donut's eyes, how can you also be with them? It doesn't make sense. And now for definitely the biggest reach yet.
Pro-death to people who don't share his beliefs propaganda.
That is a bold statement. And what does he have to back this up?
For example, one of his videos is titled, "Predator Takes Shotgun to the Face," and features a picture of him smiling in the corner of the thumbnail next to an image of a terrified man about to be executed by cops, with the text that reads, "Head removal."
In that video, Donut breaks down a situation in where police respond to a call of a child being SA'd by her stepdad, and that same stepdad threatening to kill the mother. In the police body cam footage, the stepdad pulled a gun and was shot by police. It would be incorrect to say that Donut supports death of those who simply do not agree with him. By In Praise of Shadows evidence, Donut supports the death of child-abusing, hostage-taking predators, which I feel like most of us would. In Praise of Shadows is just blatantly lying. Because of this, a lot of people called In Praise of Shadows a pedophile for essentially defending a pedophile. I think this is a pretty far reach. I don't think it's fair, but when you don't do your research, I guess this is what happens.
Wendigoon seems very comfortable with a man who makes his living worshipping violence committed by the state. He's a man of no conviction, claiming to be very against the government and for the rights of the people, while at the same time giving a warm embrace to one of the biggest fascist bootlickers on the internet.
So, In Praise of Shadows goes back to the pro-state accusation in a comparison of Donut and Wendigoon. He says that it makes no sense how a pro-state fascist bootlicker is friends with someone who is very anti-government. First of all, Donut is not a fascist bootlicker. One of the core ideas of fascism is that it gives all control to the government, and historically, fascist dictators don't really like the idea of the public having guns. Donut is ultimately pro-constitution and pro-freedom. This YouTuber paints Donut as a pro-state fascist to make Wendigoon seem like a man who is not true to his beliefs, perpetuating the idea that he is a liar and lacks conviction.
And the only thing that one could reasonably gather from this picture of them hugging is that he too is a fascist bootlicker himself.
That is just not true, and there are so many examples of this that are so easy to find just by watching his content.
Wendigoon has collaborated with Plagued Moth, a completely shameful content creator who reviewed snuff films on his Patreon before it was taken down, and has been accused of showing genuine gore content to minors on Discord, and whose main YouTube channel consists of him reviewing censored videos of horrible acts of real-life violence and death.
Now, obviously, the stuff that Plagued Moth did is pretty bad. However, I don't think any of it is relevant to Wendigoon, as the only ties that Plagued Moth has to Wendigoon is from a collaboration they did 3 years ago, long before the controversy started.
He is publicly friends with Shoe on Head, who is a conservative masquerading as a leftist, who has built a career off of lazy anti-woke content, complaining about SJWs, who says stuff like, Karl Marx rising from the grave finding out his movement has been taken over by fat, ugly, mentally ill losers.
In research for this video, I watched a few of Shoe on Head's videos, and I can tell you she definitely is a leftist. She's not a far leftist like In Praise of Shadows is, and it seems like that's the only criticism he really has for her. Because she's not as left as he is, she's on the right.
He is friends with Brandon Buckingham, a gun YouTuber who has been accused of threatening rape.
Everything he just said was a complete lie. Brandon Buckingham is not a gun YouTuber. He made one video with Donut Operator and Brandon Herrera at one of their creator range days where he shot a few guns. Again, for one video. And accused of threatening rape? That was a complete lie made up by Andrew Tate wannabe Sneeko. Not to mention the image In Praise of Shadows used in the background, displaying Brandon's grandfather recovering from a brain injury.
He is friends with Oompaville, a gun-obsessed content creator that has taken advantage of Nakado Avocado's mental decline, for fame and for money. And on top of that, has made content with the human trafficker, Andrew Tate.
I was honestly pretty surprised to see Oompaville in this video, because he is probably the most neutral commentary YouTuber on the platform, and is not political at all in any of his videos. He is labeled as gun-obsessed. Well, sure, he does have an extensive collection, but I don't see how owning guns is a bad thing. In Praise of Shadows certainly makes it seem like it is a bad thing, yet he never gives any reason as to why. The second criticism of Oompaville was that he supposedly took advantage of Nikocado Avocado's mental decline, which at the beginning of Oompaville's and Nick's relationship, that would be fair to say. However, the two eventually ended up collaborating and even starting a podcast together. Thanks to Oompaville and this collaboration, Nick is generally seen in a more positive light. In Praise of Shadows then criticizes Oompaville for interviewing the human trafficker Andrew Tate. Yes, Oompaville did interview Andrew Tate, However, this was before the allegations of human trafficking had come forward. Not only that, but Oompaville says that he regrets interviewing him and giving him more of a platform to speak on. He would know this if he did just a little bit more research.
He is friends with Mutahar, who argued against Andrew Tate being deplatformed from social media websites, and has recently showcased a great deal of transphobia in his most recent video.
Remember earlier when In Praise of Shadows accused Wendigoon of using his religion as a shield from criticism?
The flagrant use, from my perspective, of his religion as a shield from criticism.
If you're aware about the Mutahar Keffals situation, then you know that this is In Praise of Shadows' biggest contradiction yet. Allow me to explain. Last month, Mutahar released a video on the transgender activist named Keffals, who scammed her audience in a GoFundMe. In the video, Mutahar referred to Keffals by all of her preferred pronouns, as am I, as well as emphasizing how the video is not about Keffals being trans. It was about the scam. People like In Praise of Shadows didn't care about the issue at hand, though. They just labeled Mutahar as a transphobe simply because he criticized a trans creator. This is a perfect example of a creator and their community using their identity as a shield from criticism. How can you criticize Wendigoon of doing something with no evidence to back it up, and then turn around and do the exact same thing?
He has publicly interacted in a friendly way with the account Rock Solid on multiple occasions, and with just a quick look at their profile, I saw them liking anti-trans posts and neo-Nazi content.
In Praise of Shadows doesn't show any evidence of anti-trans posts, and the only neo-Nazi one is of a joke asking if Hitler was autistic, and when looking through Rock Solid's account, I could not find any anti-trans posts or neo-Nazi content that he liked. And again, just because you interact with somebody's post does not mean you're friends, and it also does not mean you agree with everything that they say. In Praise of Shadows really doesn't seem to understand this, as he continues to paint Wendigoon as a bad person just because of the Twitter accounts that he's interacted with.
He has interacted positively with Garand Thumb, who has said, "The traditional family should be encouraged and strengthened. I see little to no support from the government or big media."
That seems to me just like a pretty harmless conservative take.
He has said anti-trans statements. He has called people degenerates, and has said that non-traditional sexual interactions are a disgusting, hedonistic lifestyle. That is the breakdown of the family unit.
In that tweet that In Praise of Shadows referenced, Garand Thumb is referring to the act of swinging, or sleeping around. The tweet has no indication of being anti-trans, and In Praise of Shadows brings up no proof in where Garand Thumb has ever been transphobic in any way.
Wendigoon is publicly friends with Brandon Herrera, who has made jokes that implied that he was sympathetic with public shooters who killed leftists, and collaborated with Kyle Rittenhouse, who has posted images of himself with an MP40, which is a gun used by the Nazis, that he described as the original ghetto blaster.
Sympathetic with shooters that killed leftists. I'm sure he's referring to Kyle Rittenhouse, and like I said before, in that case, it was ruled as self-defense, and again, take that how you will. And while yes, the MP40 was a gun used by the Nazis, Brandon Herrera reviews every type of gun on the face of the planet. The only reason In Praise of Shadows would bring this up is to paint Brandon Herrera as some kind of neo-Nazi or fascist. This is completely illogical. Brandon has stated many times that his favorite gun is the AK-47, a gun invented and used by Russian communists. Does that mean Brandon Herrera is a communist? No, it is illogical, a very far reach, and yet another example of confirmation bias.
Then, of course, there is his username. To the Algonquin people, the Wendigo is a negative spiritual symbol that is to be avoided and whose name is to never even be said out loud or written down. So I know there's a bit of a hypocrisy there on my part, but we kind of do have to say it for academic purposes, so apologies for that.
In Praise of Shadows then criticizes Wendigoon over his username, essentially calling it cultural appropriation.
He has attempted to deflect from criticism over the use of the name by saying that his grandfather was Native American, and that he learned these things culturally through him. But I personally have to look at it from the hypothetical perspective.
He then goes on to essentially say that just because his family was a part of the culture doesn't mean he gets to talk about the culture?
The other thing that I would add to this is that Wendigoon and I are practically neighbors, and I know this area very well. Okay, so I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and between that and the reservation, you have the community of Lake Junaluska, which isn't actually even a real town. You can walk across the whole thing in a matter of minutes. You got Waynesville, you have Maggie Valley, and a few other small drive-by communities. And beyond that is the Cherokee Reservation.
This all seems pretty irrelevant, but the way he tries to tie it all together later is actually pretty crazy.
According to the latest census, there are only 23 black people who live in Maggie Valley. There are 15 Native Americans despite it touching the reservation. Most of this area used to be sundown towns. It is about as white as you could possibly get. Deep Appalachia is very white country, and for the most part, is exceptionally racist. Genuinely in this part of the country, you have to assume that any white person you meet is racist unless they show you otherwise.
That is a massive generalization of a very, very large group of poor and impoverished people, solely based on the color of their skin. It is a harmful stereotype that is just not true.
Almost all of these little towns are well over 90% white, but if you were to drive through Maggie Valley, you would find antique stores selling busts of Native American braves, carved wooden eagles, vintage paintings of buffalo, super racist generalizations that idealize the idea of the noble, good kind of Native American. And then you'll drive onto the reservation, and it's just run down and poor as shit except for the casino.
Run down and poor is how you should describe most of Appalachia, but he only uses it when describing the condition of the Native American reservation, and there is clear intention behind that.
He has said that the Wendigoon name came from his cultural connection to native lore through his grandfather's side, but I can assure you that unless you were on the reservation itself, that actual native culture has no aspect in the general lives of the people around here, other than the racist trinkets that depict them.
In this section, In Praise of Shadows is essentially accusing Wendigoon of lying about his Native American heritage as a reason for using the name Wendigoon.
To insinuate that he can use the Wendigo name by citing local cultural native customs is completely absurd to a person who lives in the same general vicinity as he does. It is obvious that he just thought Wendigos were cool, and has come up with some seemingly strange backstory lie that is easily proven to not be true, unless, his grandfather is Algonquin and just moved to Tennessee. But if that were the case, I don't know why he wouldn't just come out and say that by now. And the reason why he doesn't is because it isn't true.
He probably doesn't come out and say it because he shouldn't have to. It's nobody's business but him and his family's.
Like it always being said that his interest in cryptids and horror began with oral folktales in Appalachia that are passed down and told to children. I assure you, as someone who lives near him and has for most of my life, this is total bullshit.
How would you know? Every family has different customs and stories and folklore from their culture that are probably not told in other families. He is once again just making assumptions, and this time because they are not what he experienced himself. He has a different perspective. He is becoming the very thing that he criticized at the very beginning of this hit piece. And for the record, Appalachian folklore and storytelling in regards to cryptids and monsters have been told for decades.
And is some weird, false, cultural, imaginative idealization of the American South that is not actually true to the real Appalachia. We aren't sitting around at night talking about the goddamn Mothman and shit. I even came from a poor family, and he didn't.
How is that relevant at all? I came from a poor family, and that makes me better. It's absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, maybe your family wasn't sitting around the campfire talking about cryptids. But that's your family, that's your experience, that's your culture, that's your perspective. He then goes on to acknowledge how Wendigoon disagrees with the idea of cultural appropriation, and believes that it's his right to use the name Wendigoon.
If we develop the idea that we can't speak of certain people, then we're no better than those who silence them. He's basically using the I have a few black friends excuse to tell indigenous people to fuck off, and to not bother him, so that he can continue without criticism to make a lot of money by selling plushies of a monster that was invented by a white British man that is ultimately making fun of their culture, as well as plastic figurines, posters, shirts, and other merchandise that depicts Wendigos. I don't know if he fully realizes the irony of being a rich and famous person taking a symbolic figure from a smaller native group of people that he is not connected to in any way.
We have already established that there is no reason to believe that Wendigoon is lying about his Native American heritage. Then, In Praise of Shadows makes it seem like Wendigoon is profiting off of the Wendigo, when in reality he's profiting off of himself. It wouldn't matter what Wendigoon's mascot was, he'd make just as much money. He's not profiting off of the Wendigo any more than you are by bringing it up in a monetized YouTube video. In Praise of Shadows makes it seem like Wendigoon is profiting off of another culture, when in reality he's capitalizing on the success he's had as a creator and storyteller.
It has become a more common thing for people to call him out on his beliefs, his behaviors, and at the continued use of the Wendigo in his name and the merchandise that he makes a lot of money off of. It became so much of a conversation that he even put out a statement trying to shut this down, saying, "Some rude and slanderous things have been said about my character, and I just want to clarify that I am not right-wing or bigoted or anything besides thankful for my opportunity to make goofy YouTube. The only thing I believe in is loving God and my wife."
In reality, Wendigoon made that post because he was receiving attacks based on his religion.
Donut Operator. You know, the ex-cop who makes death content. The Wendigoon shared a picture of the two of them hugging not long after this. Can be found in the comments of this post asking if Wendigoon wants him to start killing people who said that he was right-wing.
When I first saw this, I kind of laughed because Donut's reply is so obviously a joke and not meant to be taken seriously at all. To me, this is just another example of how far In Praise of Shadows is reaching.
I really only care about this because if you have that large of a platform and make your money from being a public persona, then you are no longer fully a private person, and your political beliefs do in fact matter and are a fair topic of debate.
I really don't like this idea that just because you are a public figure, you have to speak up about political issues and your beliefs about them. I personally think we'd be better off if most public figures just shut up and did their jobs. The job being entertaining their fans. Wendigoon is here to tell stories, not to talk about his political beliefs. He then complains about how he got bullied on Twitter and calls all the people who defended Wendigoon Nazis.
And to be honest, if you're a public figure who is being criticized publicly, and the only people who come to your defense are Nazis, then that can only be read as two ways. Either that you're sympathetic to their views, or that you're perfectly fine making money from them.
So, either Wendigoon is a Nazi or he's fine with Nazis. Makes sense.
And if anyone ever criticized me, and people's reaction to it was to immediately start using hate speech, I would shut that shit down so fast. I think that most decent people who work online would do the exact same.
Wendigoon is not responsible for what his audience says or does. When you have a fan base that big, statistically, you're going to have a few of them who are going to be unhinged losers. You cannot possibly police a community that big. Also, Wendigoon has actually come out and told people not to harass or insult people in his defense. Yet, In Praise of Shadows still pushes the idea that Wendigoon is in support of this hate speech.
Right in the midst of this going on, a very funny thing happened, and that Wendigoon followed me on Twitter. I was not following him at the time. He never publicly told people to stop calling me a faggot. He never once reached out to me privately, but he did follow me, which means in my eyes that he 100% knew what was happening because I did tweet about it several times, and then followed me to let me know that he knew, and that he was watching and that he intended to do nothing to stop it. Why else would he follow me in that exact moment?
Maybe he just liked one of your videos. I mean, you are in the same community. And it turns out that's exactly why he followed you. Wendigoon said that after this video came out.
We could talk about the time that Nick Spheres did a video about the disturbing movie Iceberg, who is a great horror trance creator. Wendigoon famously did a very popular video on that particular Iceberg challenge as well. And in the comments of her video, he said, "We will be watching your career with great interest," which is just kinda gross, because in a way it is similar to him following me. It is him telling her that he sees that she's doing similar content to him, and his presence in the comments is undercutting her video, while he also at the same time seemingly makes it look like he supports trans people.
This is absolutely delusional. Wendigoon made a very wholesome joke from a Star Wars meme. Wendigoon clearly just enjoyed the video and wanted to show support for a smaller creator, but In Praise of Shadows saw this as an intimidation tactic and nothing but an attempt to make himself look better in the public eye.
Like in the responses to his comment, people are saying things like, "Wendigoon says trans rights," while meanwhile he's simultaneously tweeting about Christian multiple times. We could talk about another time, where someone made a YouTuber gay sex alignment chart and put Wendigoon as a sub-bottom, to which he responded to them and said, "What did I do to hurt you?" Which, clearly is a joke, but also the worst kinds of straight guys when they make jokes related to queerness, almost exclusively direct the punchline at femme gays and bottoms, because they view them as lesser than masculine tops.
Bro, what are you talking about, man? He made a joke. The chart was clearly just a joke.
And the thing that people kept saying to me in all of this was, why do you even care? which, if you watch the comments under the video, I guarantee you will happen again, with takes like, oh, he's just a YouTuber. Why does it matter? Or, so what if he's a conservative? Is that a problem? Which, the answer to that is yes.
This is where In Praise of Shadows starts wrapping up his video and showing us his true intentions behind making it.
But the reason that I care is because this does not belong in horror, or anywhere. I care deeply about horror, and everything that he does has demonstrated so far in his career that he should not be welcomed in our spaces, or even, just in public in general.
He shouldn't be allowed in public because of the political beliefs you accuse him of having, and he's the fascist? In Praise of Shadows then wraps up the video by calling Wendigoon a homophobe and a racist, using all kinds of buzzwords with no real evidence or logical backing. And that's where the video ends. Confirmation bias is the act of only searching for information that supports your prior belief. Combine that way of thinking with a political ideology and a deep hatred for somebody and their community, then you get something like bad conservative horror movies by In Praise of Shadows. I think it goes without saying that this video is not based in fact or logic. It's full of lies and slander and misrepresentation of a truly genuine and kind-hearted creator in the YouTube community. To say that a person shouldn't be allowed in certain spaces or in public in general simply because of their assumed political beliefs is not okay. I sincerely hope that In Praise of Shadows learns from his mistake. And with all the attention he's been getting, I wouldn't be surprised if he could never fully recover from this. This may go down as one of the greatest examples of career suicide in the history of YouTube. I'm not saying it's deserved, of course. Everybody makes mistakes, and I believe that everybody can recover from those mistakes. But hey, what do you guys think? Let me know down below. I'm gonna end this video here. It didn't go as in-depth as I wanted it to. I wanted to dive deeper into In Praise of Shadows' reasoning for making this video and providing a more empathetic approach and understanding why he did what he did, kind of like the psychological aspect of it. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get there for various reasons. I mean, it's 3 in the morning and I feel like crap, so I will be going to bed after uploading this video. So if you enjoyed, please leave a like. I did work pretty hard on it. But with that said, goodbye.